It doesn't matter if it's a life anymore. Remember when we used to have a debate like 2 years ago? Is it a life or is it not? It's not about is it a life or is it not. It's about, doesn't matter if I kill the baby. It's my right to do it.
Right. Welcome back to another episode of PPK. We are back at it. Boys are back at it. Consistent. Doing our thing. Let's get right into it, Meeks. What are we doing today?
Yeah, we're talking about the culture of death. And hopefully if you're watching, you notice my hat. And the thing is, if you're not wearing it, you're part of the culture of death, unfortunately. Don't worry, these aren't released yet, so don't get too scared. But we're talking about the culture of death. I was kind of just sitting thinking about the Texas shooting that just recently happened. And not that this is supposed to be a gun control debate or anything like that. But I feel like the conversation always goes to guns and what government intervention is okay and what isn't. And I think what never gets talked about is the culture that we have created, the mental health issues or all the other factors around besides the person who just gets the gun. Besides the gun, the thing that does it, everything behind the individual, his community, and the society that we've created.
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that doesn't get talked about enough. We have podcasts where we try to talk about things. So I thought it was a good fit.
Well, and you think about what we're trying to do here, right? We're saying about changing the culture from within. And I think this hits home because what we're saying is, and we were just talking about this as we were preparing for this show, Keone, we were talking about that correlation between Holy Mother Church and the world, right? So if the church is going through some things, then the world is going to be going through some things. And we see that. We see the fracturedness. We see the father wound. We see the evil that has entered into the church that's really trying to change the church from within, right? From this liberal theology or whatever it may be. And I think, why is that so important for us today? We think about like our own accountability and responsibility as it relates to is that a little best baby Gianna hanging out?
Yeah, what you're hearing in the background is a 10-month-old that is going ballistic because it's her bedtime. So my apologies.
That's the reality of what we do. That's nice. I miss that girl. But I think it goes back to our accountability and responsibility and how we inform, feed, influence, effectuate both the church and the culture. And what we're saying, as you alluded to, it makes is the culture that we created. And now we're going to act surprised. Right? We're going to act surprised when somebody loses it and does an atrocious, evil thing like that. Yet, boy, we condone, we glamorize evil all day long. Whether there's nothing wrong with playing Grand Theft Auto, right? Because that's just whatever when you're sitting there and you can objectify women, run people over, shoot people. But that's okay. Those young minds are going to grow up and they're going to make better decisions, I guess, when they get older. Or when we think about the murdering of babies, right? We talk about that where people always try to draw that conclusion between you guys you're pro-life when it comes to, abortion, but when it comes to gun control, because, the gun's what killed somebody, not the person like pulling the trigger or losing his mind. And anyway, I think that's what we're trying to talk about here is put those things aside and let's talk about the real problem, right? The corruption of the soul, right? The spiritual death that we see, the lack of morality because of the lack of God in the public square. Shoot, Keone, you know this real time. I mean, your mom, your sister, you work in the mental health field. You're dealing with wounded souls every single day. And you're living and dealing with the consequences of this real time. What say you, Keone?
I mean, there's so much there. I think just briefly, it made me think of, I had a conversation with my wife, Michelle, I think within this past week, just looking at the state of the world and the state of the church and the correlation and thinking about kind of Pope Francis and some things that might be questionable and things that have been put in place, right? Whether it be liberal or progressive or what have you, right? But then correlating that to the president that we have in the most powerful country in the world and how they're connected in a sense, ideology speaking in some ways, right? And just like, yeah, we're going to have to suffer that because how can we be surprised that the government, all the Catholic people within government who say they're Catholic, I mean, I don't think any of them can receive communion, yeah, rightly so.
Shouldn't
So,
be. Yeah.
yeah, they shouldn't be. And so just thinking about like, how can we be surprised? And, you know, I was talking to, a client of mine who brought up the Texas shooting too, and just, you know, the fear and just the worry and the state of the world. And I was saying from a Christian standpoint, you know, exactly what you said, Pops, like the grace that enters into the world, the entire world, is through the church first. We're the means in which God allows the grace and is using us as an instrument, his holy mother church, for the grace to spread to the world, right? So if the world is in shambles, it speaks to us as what we're doing to spread the truth. Because what happens is, you think about the people in Israel going to out of Exodus and into their promised land. What were they doing the whole time in that journey? They were seeing all these pagans people doing what they do, the fallen human nature, worshiping other gods, living lives that were faulty. And what happens is, we either can minister to them or we can do what they do and fall into it. And what is God doing? God knows our heart, and he's trying to protect us, right? But so often we do what they do, what the culture is doing. And so what we're seeing now is, I'm thinking, this culture of death that's being glamorized. And I think a lot from a Christian standpoint, it's like, well, yeah, of course, it's of the world. But what are we doing as Christians to stand up to that? And so I think it's step one is just spreading the nature of like, okay, let's also talk about the culture itself. Like, what is it promoting? But from another standpoint, from a Christian standpoint, like, what are we doing to fight back? And I think that's huge, because we're going to have to suffer the effects of the faithful that are, I mean, all of us in general, but especially the faithful that are offending God day in and day out. And Mother Mary made it very clear, like, stop offending God, because there's so much worse that can come. So I know there's a lot there, but just kind of thinking about, like, to your point, Meeks, so often we, in wanting to seek answers, we look to the government to impose something. But then it's like, okay, that might work, but broken people are going to find ways to hurt people. It doesn't matter what you take away, right? And it's like, okay, but let's look at the people. Let's look at what we are glamorizing, right? And I think that's oftentimes more important, because that's what people idealize. People want the attention. People want to be self-seeking. People want whatever, to follow their passions, their emotions. People are learning that human beings aren't peoples with dignity, but a means to an end, right? All of that. Why aren't we talking about that enough? So I think those are my thoughts on the topic, and I think it's an important one.
Yeah, so I was listening to Pat Coffin today, because he actually just recently dropped an episode on basically all the things that go behind a mass shooting. And it was a lot about video games, which whether you agree with that or not, it's everything that we do has consequences. So the person that he brought on brought a good point, because obviously me and Kenny growing up as, I think, Kenny, are you Gen Z or are you millennial?
I think I'm Gen Z.
Yeah, I think,
but I might be a
Gen
millennial.
Z. I think you're a start.
Yeah, I think
Gen
I'm a
Z.
start.
So as Gen Z, obviously, and regular human beings, we played Call of Duty a little bit, and there's this whole idea of, but obviously 99% of people don't end up like that. But the guy that Pat Coffin brought on, said that when we were kids, none of us wore seatbelts. We're all still good. Are we going to stop outlawing seatbelts because, these people are good? Yeah. So there's a certain level of like, okay, I think that's a good argument there. They made another good point that there was actually, I guess there was no laws, and I need to get the factual sort of terminology here, but they're discussing how not until 1968 had there been really laws restricting kids from buying like rifles or certain things, right? So like even after World War II, kids could go to this like a military excess store and buy guns that were used there. So things that could do the same damage that we see now in mass shootings. And that was until 1968 that we put things into law. We didn't have our first mass shooting at a school until 1975 in Ontario, I believe, in Canada. So what we're trying to figure out is, okay, so what changed? We had more access to guns back then. We have less now. We definitely have less knowledge about guns in terms of individuals being able to know how to use it. So what are some big things that changed? Obviously, Roe v. Wade is a big thing that changed. The internet's a huge thing that changed. Things like video games. And then I think just the culture itself has all changed.
No fault divorce, right? Where
So-
people, the fractured family.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's all these things that we have to if we're going to have this conversation, let's just be serious and let's be real about it. And let's not grab or straw man anybody or anything like that. Let's just really state what's really going on here, because it's not the guns. Nothing of that has changed. It's been 68 to now. What's the difference? Mm-hmm. I think we all know the differences in some ways. I just saw a video today from Live Action in which girls leaving a Planned Parenthood, and there's pro-lifers with their signs or something like that out. And then the girl who's leaving just said, "Oh yeah, I just killed my baby. I just killed my baby," saying that to these people. So what we have on one hand is it's not anymore about, you're not going to guilt me. It's like my freedom. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a life anymore. Remember we used to have a debate 2 years ago. Is it a life or is it not? It's not about is it a life or is it not. It's about, doesn't matter if I kill the baby. It's my right to do it.
Right.
So we used to have the argument. So now if we're saying it's my right to kill, and so that kill now resembles freedom in the same way that if someone else now sees a right to kill as a sense of freedom to get from whatever shackles they're in, whatever mental health struggles that they're in, to be able to be seen for the first time ever, right? That's what a lot of these people want to do, is be seen for whatever reason. And a lot of these people don't have, criminal record. I don't think the Vegas shooter had anything on his record at all. So there's this whole thing of okay, so where is the issue? Now, if we have people talking yeah, I just killed my baby, and now this is some resemblance of freedom and my right to do things, I don't see how now we could blame somebody else for doing the same exact thing on the same being older now.
Well, I mean, if you even think about it, right there, the whole infanticide piece where there's laws that are being proposed that even after the baby's born, up until, 28 days, you can kill the baby. I mean, what are you talking about, right? We have laws right now. I mean, we think about the Scott Peterson case in California, and they have other ones, right, where you had a double homicide because you killed Lacey Peterson, who was pregnant, and it was a double homicide. Well, the law seems to think that that's a baby, or kind of sort of, because maybe not, because it's Roe versus Wade. So it's this craziness that if we really want to, like you said, have an honest dialogue, let's talk about that. You're seeing some of this stuff in social media where you have people literally saying, "I wish I was aborted." Just let that sink in for a second, because you're told from day one, from especially this crazy left wing group, that your life isn't life and it doesn't matter anyway. That you're just an accessory, you're an obstacle, you don't mean anything. So when somebody says that I wish I was aborted, and yet, but we want to be super, we want to pay attention to suicide. It's just these people who are politicizing a real human issue are talking out of both sides of their mouth, strictly from a political sense, because they want power, they want influence, they play on emotions. And I think that's the part where we get frustrated. It's people try to draw the seamless garment argument, especially that was I can't remember the name, but tries to make all of these evils equal. Racism is the same as abortion, yada, 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 and all this other stuff. And then it pins us against each other. And we stop talking about objectively and logically and reasonably to say, look, what is it? What's really at the core of this issue right now?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
yeah.
No, I was just going to say, to sort of kind of wrap out my point, when we were looking at how big suicide has gotten, that wasn't really an issue back if we're talking pre-1968 or some of these things. And just if we just set the table for here's our culture, and you have divorce, or most of the time people not even in wedlock, and so now it's okay, so the relationship doesn't matter, and then it's never about prioritizing the kid. It's always just a negative effect of something that's from our freedom and involving ourselves in this sexual act, there's a negative side effect towards it. Or if it's, hey, there's a negative side effect of, me exploring my relationship, being a sexual being like we all are as humans. And unfortunately, this happens and now it prohibits my career. So everything about a kid is seen as negative. And then it's Then when we have kids, it's okay to divorce and leave everything off, and they have to be battling between all these weekends, between this parent and that parent. And then now they have stepped down in this situation, or now mom's lesbian somehow, miracle, and all this other stuff. And then they grow up, right? And so now they're in, let's talk about my age group. And then now we have phones where all of our value comes from being what's cool on here, and it's not in front of people. And then those people that go and shoot schools are the same people at school that we all ignore, or we make fun of, or are sitting in the table and they smell weird, so we don't want to be with them, whatever it's going to be. And then we go and question, oh my gosh, why are people weird, while we just sit in our screens all day, and then we have literally food that's probably 90% more chemicals than it is actual real food. And then we graduate, and then we have a ton of debt because all we did was just spend time partying and drinking this whole time, and once again just getting into this sort of lifestyle that's pleasure filled and completely service level. And then we go to a job where we realize, oh yeah, no one actually values us or care about us because we're all replaceable. And then what we do is, then now it's like, so you're still drinking, so you're working 8 to 10 to 12 hours, and then you just drink, and then that's a fall cycle until you retire, and then you die. And then you're thinking, why are people so depressed now? I can't, it doesn't make sense to me. Why do we all think that we're so depressed while we just sit here and we scroll, and all we do is worship celebrities that have literally nothing to do with us, and they're, for the most part, pretty tied in with Satan and selling their souls, and we have no clue about it. And so it's just this constant thing of like, that when I was listening to this podcast, they brought up that Netflix said that their only competition is sleep. So it's like, it's this whole idea of like constantly being consumed, and they are controlling your every move, and we're so blind to that. And then when these things happen, we're just so shocked, and Steve Kerr just couldn't believe anything would happen. And it's just some of these things where I think we're just so far removed. Not that like, yeah, there should be an intense reaction to what happened because it's a grave evil, but it's also like, hey Steve, you make $5 million a year, Steph makes 40, Draymond makes 30, Clay makes 30. You guys could literally go throughout all of San Francisco, the entire district, maybe even the whole Bay Area, and you can employ veterans by yourself to protect schools. But what do? You go up on a press conference, you sit on a table, you cry, you bang your fist about we need change, while you get to go back to your mansion, and everybody else has to sit and make sure we watch you, we support you, we keep doing all these things. And what are you wearing? You're wearing a shirt made by people in China who jump out of company. They literally commit suicide, jump out of the windows to escape things like sweatshops from, where your t-shirt's being made. Your commissioner can't take a stand against China because he knows that they own him, and they're not allowed to say anything bad about it. So it's like this whole cycle of complete nonsense that I really just, I can't get behind, and I don't want to sit and pretend anymore that we can just put something on our story. We can put Steve Kerr or somebody taking a stand, or maybe let's make a shirt that says shoot hoops, not people, and act like we're doing something. You're not doing anything, dude. Because guess what? In another 6 months, unfortunately, it might probably happen again, because we're not going to change anything in our society from this point to that point. And I think the reality is like, we need to be praying. We need to be doing something better. We need to be self-armed. We need to take these things seriously, and being able to protect ourselves and our community. I think that's a real thing that needs to happen. If there's any steps that government needs to take, it's employing veterans or armed people in front of schools to prevent this stuff from happening. So I don't want to act like this is not an issue, but it's like, dude, we're just going to go to the same cycle. Let's keep making stories. Let's keep making cool t-shirts so that we can sell money off of kids' lives, and doing this whole thing of like, let me do this rant. So, oh, look, now Steve's a great guy, man.
I'm so woke.
Why doesn't Steve run for governor, dude?
I'm so woke.
So it's just like, it's just frustrating. That's the whole point of this, is like, let's have a real conversation about what's the difference between 1968. There's no laws to restrict. I could have got a gun at 12 years old, a rifle, at 1967.
Yeah. So what's that difference? Family, God, virtues being instilled in the home, kids being raised right instead of, to do all these wrongs. But Keone, I know obviously Miko and I are pretty on fire about this stuff. What you got going on over there, Keone?
I think it just the loss of the identity and the purpose of every man. We've lost it, because when you misrepresent the identity of the person, you don't see them as a creature of God, as someone with dignity that cannot be taken away. Well, then you have no purpose. And then there's when you don't see a purpose in yourself and you don't see a purpose in other people. Well, you use people, and then if you have no purpose, you get depressed, and then you don't want to be on this earth. right? And then you are reckless or impulsive or whatever. And so I think about, this idea of identity and the culture and how distorted it is. Just being in the mental health field. And you think about the idea of suicide. We have a legal and ethical duty as a therapist to do everything reasonable to help provide a barrier or protect the client from suicide. We don't have to stop it legally, but we have to do everything we can to take appropriate measures to prevent it, right? And I think that's interesting because why don't we honor the self-determination of the client? They want to kill themselves, right? But we know, and we know without saying that this client's life is valuable, and even though they want to do it, it's because of something that's not. It's abnormal. It's a result of a mental illness or a disorder or a hurt or a wound, right? If you want to make it more politically correct, right? So we understand that. So they say, no, you have a responsibility as a healer to prevent that. But everything else doesn't matter. If I have a 90-year-old who has a terminal illness and they say, well, I just want to pull the plug, what does a therapist have to do? You honor their self-determination. Ethically. You don't say, well, I don't agree with that or whatever. No, you have to honor their self-determination. And then you go to the abortion debate. Well, what, you just honor the self-determination of the mother. It's her body. She gets to do what she wants. But with suicide, why is this the exception? Why is it when someone comes to me and says, you know what? F my life. No one cares. I'm hopeless. I have no future. No one loves me. I want to die. Why not we say, like, dude, you're right, man. Yeah, you go for it. It's your choice, man. Your body. But no. I can be legally in trouble because I didn't try to take appropriate measures to prevent it. Why? It's not consistent. So you can see we're confused. And like, we know without saying that someone who's suicidal is not in the right state of mind. But everywhere else, you think about transgender, you think about all the other just confusion in the world, abortion and all that, like someone saying, I wish I was aborted. Like even just the idea of a mother who is designed to nurture and care for a baby wanting to kill it, you can see there's a distortion there. Just, it's unnatural. So like, it just doesn't add up. And so why don't we step back and be like, okay, why is that the case though? Why is one party different than the other? Why is it that we sometimes understand, but then other times we don't really know. We're just going to let the person choose, right? And it's like, okay, well, what does that lead to? Well, the identity of the person and their purpose, and that stems from us. It starts internally, right? And then it starts to bleed into a culture. And so that's what I think is lost because it doesn't make sense. I thought about that so many times of like, of course I want to help this person, right? Who was suicidal. But why is that recognized and legally and ethically obligated for me to do something? But I can let someone else just abortion or pull the plug, right? So we're seeing a confused culture where we pick and choose what's protected and what's not protected, what's worth it and what's not, when it's okay to honor their choice, right? It's their idea of who they are. Let them embrace it. Why don't we say, no, that person's confused and they're probably mentally unstable if their conception of reality and reality don't align, right? But we endorse it now. So it's so inconsistent. And I'm thinking, okay, well, when are we going to reflect and be like, well, where does that lead us? Where has this confused ideology? Where is this idea of self-determination? When is it our job to be responsible to spread the truth and to help our brothers and sisters who are living a life that is confused or wounded or whatever? When is it going to be our responsibility to actually help them just like it is for me to prevent suicide? To do what I can to prevent it, right? It's the same thing for the kid who's bullied or outcasted, or the mother who wants to end the life of the baby. Like all of that is our obligation. But I think we've lost that too, because we've been like Meek said, like we're on our phone, just not caring, and we play video games and we learn that like I can just kill you, and then if I die, oh well, I'll just respawn, and I'm back in the game, And it's like this. There's no sanctity for human life unless there's a liability, right? Unless I can get sued. Well, now there's sanctity.
Well, and you think about all the the videos where you have people getting mugged or shot or beat up, right? Whether it doesn't even matter, right? A guy beating up a girl. And what do people do? You think they stop them? Or they pull their phones out, right? Let me record this. Like, that's where we are today. Like, I'm looking for the
bystander
next
effect.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just crazy. But I know we're hot and heated about this because it is. And it's like when we reflect on it, it's like we are getting what we deserve and more as a culture, because we've glamorized and glorified sin. We've separated the procreative aspect of the sexual act, which is what it was made for, right? To produce life. That's what it's for, to unite spouses together, to come together and to ultimately sacrifice. But it is absolutely 100%, I think, correlated to the breakdown of the family. Everything can be, you want to see where the fundamental self-society, it all points back to brokenness in the family and the inability for us to learn virtue and our value and your dignity. All the stuff you guys both been saying, we've all been saying about that. The two questions we know people struggle with, again, I'm sure you guys get this in therapy, but we get this even in ministry, is who am I and what's my purpose? Right? That's why gender ideology is such a big, be you, man. You finally get to be you, right? And the most celebrated group demographic out there, and yet they still have issues with suicide, depression, and yet you got every major corporation supporting you, changing their logo to support you. You got holidays, you got parades going on. In the midst of this all, you got them bringing you in to corrupt the young minds of the world, and yet you're still not enough, huh? Why not?
It's interesting that what they're going to say is, well, no, it's because of the bigotry and the hatred that they experience. And I'm like, okay, let's assume that that's true. What was the suicide rate of the African Americans in slavery? Mm-hmm. Much less. It wasn't 50%. It was, I think, from numbers I've heard, and it's been a while since I think maybe like 13%.
Mm-hmm.
Significantly less. Mm-hmm. And you mean to tell me the bigotry and hatred they've experienced is more than slavery? Than Jim Crow? I don't buy it. And not only that, post-surgery, it doesn't change.
No. I mean,
not significantly.
Dr. Paul McHugh proved that, right? Who is all about that stuff. But it does go back to, again, going back to all the points you're pointing about happens in the family. And so the devil, he knows where his target is. Destroy the marriage, destroy the family, and then you get to claim souls. Meeks.
And I think in a different way, real quick, Meeks, in a very specific way to what you're saying, Pops, is destroying the family most often through the men, because they're the father of the home and they're the defender. And I was just thinking about where this topic started by the idea of a mass shooting. How many female mass shooters have we seen?
Yeah.
It's a man problem. Yes, women, there's effects, right, all the time, right? And they have their own wounds because of men, but men are failing. And it's the idea of the broken household, because the man is the defender of the home. They're the priest of the home. They're serve, protect, and defend, right? When the family is now infiltrated by evil, oftentimes, the women are going to be broken in their own ways, but men are especially broken because we have a direct responsibility to serve, protect, and defend those around us, even outside of our family, the community at large, right? So when it's distorted and the devil and the culture of death is alive, well, what happens? They don't serve, protect, and defend. They kill, destroy, and they use. Because it's distorted.
Yeah, because if the boy doesn't grow up to be a man, authentically a man, then he becomes a barbarian. You guys heard me say that before. Miko.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you'd pay attention to our last few Fulton Friday videos, and I think a big theme in Venerable Sheen's sort of life is worth living talks that he would give the show, and something a lot is like the distortion of freedom. And I think when I think about the culture of death, what I see is an obsession with freedom to just only the extent that it doesn't matter necessarily what I'm doing, the pleasure that I'm getting from the act. It's the fact that I'm exerting my freedom. And I think that's what we see in sort of everything, right? Like they're bringing up this point of, if we're talking about the thing of video games, how it actually came to law in California, I think under Schwarzenegger, maybe, that they were saying like, we got to quit with this stuff. And it went all the way to Supreme Court, and then the video games won, right? And I think it's like, because we're so obsessed with exerting our freedom that we don't care at what cost that is.
Yep.
And that's why we're saying, like, you know, well, then why don't we just do away with seatbelts or some of these other things? Like, we know that there's boundaries, right? Like the same thing that people always talk about with a game and certain boundaries of it. But I think about, like, when that person is saying, I aborted my baby, I wish I was aborted, they don't actually mean those things. It's just the point. It doesn't matter what comes across, only if I prove in this point that I exerted my freedom. And it's the saddest thing to do. I think it's the same thing with these people who obviously feel like they've just been, you know, just casted aside their whole life and have never been able to experience that fun table with the athletes or whatever is going on in their head. It's like they're exerting some sort of freedom, you know? And I think that's what Pride Month's about. It's just like, oh, we felt like we've been in this box that we can't get out of. We can't be ourselves. It doesn't matter at it doesn't matter at what cost we're going to exert our freedom. And so that's why I think it's so dangerous. And, you know, Fulton Sheen talks about, instead of a society that denudes its sin, it denudes its clothes, you know? And then he talks about, you know, the perversion of freedom. And until people realize that the greatest freedom there is the freedom to be a saint. And I think that's like, it's so difficult to get our culture to realize that, you know? Like, I remember, you know, talking about marriage a long time, and it's always like, well, you know, what does that have to do with you? So it's always this idea of like, we're just obsessed with freedom in America, which is fun. I guess that's all we've, you know, ever talked about in America. And I think that's really, it seems, obviously, I think the family's the core in some of these, but I just can't get over that fact of like, until people realize that this freedom or license that you have doesn't mean anything, you know, until we realize those things, that you're going to find people who are happier in, you know, some remote jungle in South America that have zero freedom that you have, or until we realize that, you know, I think about the obsession with freedom of women wanting to work so bad. And I don't know if this is like getting too much, but I'm just thinking like, we've got this obsession that a woman needs to have a corporate job so bad, right? Let's give a sales job. Okay, so women have been, you know, complaining about they don't have these opportunities to get in these places. So you go get a sales job, you go convince people to buy something they don't need. You get 3% of the profit that you get, so that the person that's way above you can continue to feast, get his yacht, all his other things, his 3 houses, while you do all the work for it, and you get 3% of that back. That's what you're fighting for? That's freedom? I mean, that's the thing, is like, it doesn't matter at what cost we want to exert our freedom. So if men are in the workforce, then we want to do it. It's not. You know what freedom is? Freedom is being like, I don't have to actually live by society's standards of what they think is a healthy household income, or having 3 properties, or I have passive income this way. I think what freedom looks like is I don't have to depend on any grocery store. I don't have to depend on any corporation. I don't have to depend on anybody but myself to live my life and provide for my family. That to me would be freedom. I don't think freedom is working so that kids can go to daycare and like, what are we teaching people? That's what I'm trying to, you know, I'm just like, we want to exert freedom so much that we don't care about the cost. And then we're in a place now, it's like, hey, we got all the freedom in the world, brother. You can be literally any gender. You can make one up tomorrow if you get a good case for it. It might be on CNN. Who knows? I mean, we have all the freedom in the world, yet we still have all these problems. And then we're just wondering, what's going on here? You know? So it's just like, oh man, it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. I mean, I know we're going to have another moment like this again, where it's going to be about guns and stuff. And, you know, I don't think I was exhausted enough energy to not do another podcast, but it's just like, at some point we got to talk about it. It's just, this stuff is, it's so sad. And, you know, I think that's why we're doing what we're doing right now in the ministry and World of Blaze, Preach Prophet King, and why I quit my job. Because like, people need to hear this. I mean, our generation's, you know, kids under me are suffering they don't even know a life without, like, you know, phones, or they don't know a life without their parents' camera in their face all the time. They don't know what that's like. I mean, there's some kids who didn't even know like life before masks. You know what I mean? Like, there's some things, there's so many things, and that's why we're so, you know, passionate about this stuff, because like, there's so many people who need to hear what real freedom is. Because if we're gonna leave it to the world, it's like, dude, buckle up. I mean,
well, the thing is, you talk about family, you know, you talk about freedom, and most people see it freedom from rules, constraints, right? Restrictions versus freedom for excellence, right? Virtue, holiness. And I think, where do you learn it in the family? You learn real quick about rules, regulations, that life's not about you. because we're each at service to each other. Parents at service to their children, children at service to their parents and to one another, but true charity, right? True charity. And I think that's the thing where, we think about what our Lord said, right? He said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, you think about some of those professed quote unquote Catholics out there, like the Bidens or the Pelosi's, or, pick any one of these clowns that are out there, right? Where they if you don't agree with them, you're a bigot. You're a bigot, you're divisive. And it's just like, it's interesting, because I think Jesus said that you need to love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. So you think about the way we live our Christianity, you think about things that are tangible and actionable for us is, are we living a true, authentic witness of discipleship in everything that we do? Whether it be what Keone said about just being a man and living up to that call as the priest of the home, serving, protecting, and defending all of what God has given us, especially our women and children. Are we living out a joyful Catholic witness to everybody that we encounter, where we actually make somebody better, not worse, when they encounter us? Just think about it. Like, there's so much of this that we can continue to go on and on and on, but it gets frustrating because there's so many people that are just hypocrites and talking out of both sides of their mouth, and then sitting there and the Steve Kerrs of the world, right? Why, oh, why, oh, why? It's so easy to do that at a press conference as you're in the, championships in your world, that you're so disconnected with your, privilege. And I hope the Warriors lose, because that's what Laker fans do. Except I'm not really a Laker fan right now because I want LeBron off the team. I want him to go to China or something. Anyway, I digress. Keone, as we bring this out and round it out, what else you got to say on this one, man?
Just lastly, in the idea of freedom without the emphasis on pursuing virtue through freedom becomes habitual sin. I think, just plainly put, if you focus on freedom for freedom's sake, without the emphasis on virtue, it will become habitual sin very quickly. Because when we do what I want, and that's all I care about, it becomes a vice. And vices become habitual because we're fallen.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a really good point, because I'll probably post this for the Fulton Friday, but they're not going to see it till after it's posted. But Fulton Sheen says it, so hopefully you've already seen it. But Fulton Sheen says, do you know what hell is? Hell is the eternal guarantee of human freedom. That's what he says. It's the eternal guarantee of human freedom.
That's
and
a bar.
As I'll give my last point. And I think, when we try to answer these questions of when is it going to stop, right? That was Steve Kerr's big question. I hate just sitting here trying to bully Steve Kerr the whole time and not act like he has a reason to be, we're not saying he doesn't have a reason to be mad.
Yep.
But when we're saying, when is these things going to stop? I think it stops when we take the victims of trafficking seriously, when we take down these industries that are feeding into trafficking. I think it stops when we stop aborting our children. Because now, like I said before, they're acknowledging it's just murder. It doesn't matter if it's a life or not. It's not the argument. They want to exert their freedom on it. I think, these things will stop when we try to actually care about our children. We're not just divorcing and say, it's normalized. We can do whatever we want, dude. It's all good. You'll be all right, brother. Just make sure you go to dad's every other Saturday. I think these issues stop when we stop leading our kids off to Scientology English teacher he still has the Bernie sticker on his back arm. There's so many things. It's like when we start to take virtue seriously and our responsibility as creations of God and children of God seriously, I think those are one of those things that are going to stop. Until then, this is what the culture of death is. It's millions of victims of trafficking that don't get 1 second of airtime. It's continual suicides. It's homicides in the streets of Chicago or wherever it's going to be that won't get any attention at all. We're not going to talk about that sort of gun violence. Only this gun violence that we know can bring really good division within everybody. We're talking about when is this stuff going to end? It's like when we return, man. That's when it's going to end, When we return. When we listen to Our Lady for once in one of her apparitions, all you Protestants maybe give that a little listen. There's so much here. It's like, and I guess I'll just end on, it's not going to stop when you put something on your story. That's all I'll say. So if you think you're doing something by putting something on your story, you're not really doing it.
Yeah, let's just kind of summarize that, right? There's no way you can promote abortion, promote pornography, promote promiscuity, promote divorce, promote gender confusion, promote objectification, promote self-determination at all costs, and act like you're surprised at what happens in our world. Because what we've told this generation and all the generations that suffer because of it is that your life is no meaning. There's no purpose outside of whatever you or perhaps somebody else determines. And you're nothing, you're an object to be used. And your life is meaningless. And so, I think about our purpose in life, and it is to be a saint. It is to be a saint. It's to lead other people. What the world needs is Jesus, and what the world needs to hear is that God loved you so much that he sent his son to die for you, and that your life is worth that much. And people need to know that they're loved. And, we don't want to be dismissive or trivialize the pain and the evil that has occurred in these mass shootings, or and even with some of these confused brothers and sisters that are out there really in pain, right? When they're saying stuff that they've been saying or promoting some of this evil, they're obviously in the grips of Satan, whether they acknowledge it or realize it or not. And so we got to continue to hold them up and pray for them. And I guess the only thing I want to be able to end on is like this idea of freedom to choose. Like you have a freedom right now to go to worldofblaze.org, right? And to get the midnight tea, right? I mean, I think you got the freedom to choose to sign up for the 1249 Society, right, Meeks? Right?
Yeah, you got that. I mean, you don't have the freedom to get this just yet, but you will. You have the freedom to celebrate Sacred Heart Month, and Juneteenth and Father's Day and my birthday. That's a lot of good things happening. Enjoy that freedom, baby.
So we just thank you for joining us. You got the freedom to share this with other people. Like, comment, subscribe. And you also have the freedom to, get holy or die trying. God's peace.